Breaking the gray.
Welcome back. On today's episode of the Rebel Scientist Podcast, Sarah's going to talk about remote healing. Here we go. All right, we are back for another fantastic episode of Rebel Scientist with my favorite human on the planet who teaches me something new every time we talk. Sarah Turner, how are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, always a pleasure, Russ. Yeah.
Good. Well, we have another amazing topic, and each one of these things we talk about, we could have an entire episode just on one of our points. So let's dig into it because we have a really jam-packed episode today. Our topic is remote healing, and with the millions of us that have been stuck at home for 8, 9, 10 months, it feels like 360 months. It is important that we figure out ways to create healing moments. And let's start off. What is remote healing as a topic, and is it possible?
It's a very interesting topic, and it's quite a broad topic. So what we're going to talk about today, I think, are some of the more esoteric ways of healing. And remote healing, or sometimes it's called distance healing. It's healing that's usually done by a specific person who's using a specific technique, the healer, and then they are imparting onto you some kind of energy in some form that then has an effect on you in a beneficial way. So there are lots of ways to do this, and we can talk about intention healing. We can talk about people who use frequencies or energies, but really it's a different way of healing, which involves, it's non-local. So there's no contact, which is why it's interesting for us to be talking about it, like you say, in these times when, we are going to have to explore different ways of getting our healing if we no longer can meet in person.
Yeah, and I'm sure we work in fact. You're a scientist. You work in scientific fact. We just finished having a president here in the United States that worked in his own world of fake facts. But there's facts here. And does it work? Do you believe that it works?
So if we talk about scientific facts, we have to kind of define science, because some of the things that we're going to talk about don't really conform with our current view of science. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're not scientific, but it does mean that they don't conform with some of the rules that we have in science today. So I'm going to redefine science for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So my view of science really is something that is measurable in some way and something where you can test it via experiment. Now, at the moment, it could be that for some of these energy medicines, we do not have the correct measuring devices, for example. I don't think we can be arrogant enough to think that we know everything there is to know. And certainly, if we start to think about quantum physics and all the implications of that, there are obviously a lot of spaces in science where we just don't have the tools to measure these things. So we're going to talk about some things which are mainly more subjective. So this is about kind of using yourself as a measurement or using your direct observation and being a bit open-minded. We can talk a bit about intuition and instinct and using some other of our faculties that are not necessarily orthodox scientific measurement devices.
Yeah, well, and that's great. I am a big believer in attitude and in feelings and emotions and intuition. I mean, having never meditated in my life up till about 2017 and now doing it daily, I mean, there is a noticeable difference in my positive thinking and my self-deprecation. I mean, all those things sort of go by the wayside when you're present. And So that's good that those are things that we personally feel that they're working. That kind of goes into a little bit of what you're saying is there's a combination here of the intuition and then going into the science and this sort of redefinition of science.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's about being open-minded and allowing yourself to entertain some of these more, well, I would say woo-woo. I don't know if that's insulting to people who practice these things, but more esoteric, more out there ways of thinking about things. And like I say, if you start to employ the rules of quantum physics to some of these potential healing therapies, then you do start to see, okay, there could be some mechanisms here. But for a lot of these things, the mechanisms are ill-defined, and really it's down to a leap of faith in some instances. Mm-hmm.
So let's describe remote healing and sort of how does it happen? What are some of the things that happen in remote healing that are some practices that are going on today?
Okay, so I'm going to speak from my own personal experience here because over the years I've met quite a few people who do some of these practices. So, for example, people might use muscle testing. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this, but this is something where you are looking for weaknesses in your own body and then applying that to providing some kind of information. So, for example, I have actually had therapy where the therapist has muscle tested using his fingers, and I'm pressing my finger and thumb together here, and then seeing if you can break that that connection that you've made. And the theory is if your body recognizes that there's some kind of significance to the statement that you're making, that it changes your physiology, and so you can notice that change. And it doesn't have to be a finger and thumb. You know, I've seen people do it on like a little sticky pad that they have on their belt, or there's lots of different ways of using this kind of body's intelligence. So, for example, I've been diagnosed with various issues like gut issues and when I've had them and at what time by somebody else simply kind of saying those phrases in their mind and then muscle testing for me using their own body as a proxy and actually had fairly accurate diagnosis. Now, again, I am a scientist, so I am fairly skeptical of these techniques. However, the people that have been doing them are people that I do very much admire and respect and are really very highly educated. Yeah. So that's one of the things, muscle testing, that's very, very interesting. And you can go to a lot of these people and try it for yourself. Quite often they will get you to do things like say some personal facts about yourself, and you can see, okay, when, for example, you say your name compared to a fake name, you do have a different response in your body. So there's definitely something going on. So the remote aspect of this is having somebody using their own body as a proxy for you. And so they can then test themselves to see what's going on with the other person. Like I say, it's very out there, but also very interesting. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then, so what you just described is, are you doing the work yourself on your own body and following someone else's instructions? Is that what you're doing?
No, in this instance, somebody else is doing it entirely for you. So somebody else is doing it for you. Like there's a chap called Dr. Leslie Feinberg, who is one of the people that I'm thinking about, who's developed a system where he will go through the whole body system in his mind while either looking at you so that he kind of sets his intention, or sometimes he might use a photo if you're not physically there or not physically on Zoom. He goes through the body system in a certain order that he's devised, and then he can break down your complaint. And then over a period of time, he will then give you remedial actions, or he'll even just, by the power of his intention, fix that issue that's going on in your body. And this is all based on the concept that we're not actually as separate as we would think, you know, which is actually, you know, a very ancient philosophy. I mean, the Buddhists thought this a very long time ago, this whole connection. It's just something we do not consider in Western science. However, you know, a lot of philosophies do have this theory of connectedness. So it stands to reason, if indeed we are connected on some level, that you should be able to then influence another person by your pure intention or your focus.
Well, have you personally done this?
I've had it done to me many times. I have met many of these practitioners. For some reason, I move in circles where a lot of the people that I come across do these kinds of therapies. I have to say, I don't know whether it's my skepticism or whether I'm not a sensitive individual, but I tend to not feel these energies. So I am very skeptical, although I have seen very recently, I was working with this young man who had very severe learning difficulties, and so he wasn't really able to vocalize what was going on. And I was working with a group of coaches, and we were trying to help him with some issues. Unsuccessfully, we were employing different things. We were employing light therapy. And then one of the coaches said, okay, I'm going to do some remote healing, at least to get him to sleep overnight. And bang, he slept overnight for the first night after he'd had that session. Now, whether or not, it's some kind of placebo or, again, though, what is placebo?
Right.
But who knows what was going on there? But maybe some individuals are more sensitive than others, and maybe the skepticism in some way blocks that. Because I am very skeptical naturally. Yes,
it's this. I've been to retreats both on the religious side and for meditation retreats, and you're together and the collective feeling is creates something really unique. Can you somehow create that collective feeling remotely? And because I know that a lot of it is a placebo effect of like, wow, this group here is feeling this, I'm feeling it too, and sort of you like join in on it. But it almost sounds like you can almost recreate that a little bit remotely.
Yeah. Yes, and then maybe it depends on how open you are to that.
Yeah. Right.
It depends on how open can you be to that. Although, a lot of this remote healing, potentially you don't even have to know that it's being done to you, And let's get a little bit more esoteric about it. Really, that's what probably prayer and focused intention is all about too. People who've had these amazing things happen to them in their life, and, they've had people praying for them or people focusing their intention on a better outcome.
It's interesting. I've gone through now 5 years of my therapist is remote. We only talk on the phone. Rarely have I seen her face. And there are moments where I do feel this, and she has decalcified my third eye. I mean, she has helped me get the clarity that I need. But it is so important now with everything that's going on. Creating these unique situations and the fact that we're all staying at home. Are there unique situations happening because you're home that enable remote healing? Are there things that are happening because of this? Now this world has changed. We're all remote. We're several time zones away, but we talk all the time. So I imagine it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot.
It has, and definitely technology is having an impact, because from a scientific point of view, I can definitely see how having somebody focus their intention on you or having the feeling that somebody else is caring about you would have a direct impact on your nervous system. We are pack animals after all. We are pack mammals, and we don't survive very well on our own. That's not how we've evolved to be. So I imagine that just having that connection with someone could be enough to switch you into a parasympathetic mode so that then you can initiate healing and get well. So I think from just a pure connection point of view, this technology that we have, like right now, we're speaking over Zoom, you're over there in California and here I am in England, and yet, we're able to speak. So I think from that point of view of pure connection, even though we're isolated, we can still get that feeling that we need to have. Although I would always go for face-to-face given the option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting time. I have a creative partner that he and I talk every day. I feel more connected to him during our Zoom world that we've been in for the last year than when we were meeting in person.
Right.
and I actually look forward to it. It actually is healing to have those creative moments where, which, there are limited distractions. I'm not, we're not leaving our places. We can't really go anywhere. But it is healing in a sense to know that there's somebody always there to do that. I have just a more general question. Are there groups of people that are practicing this? Are there doctors or therapists that you can go to? Are there healers that you can, go to? Is there a website where you can find a bunch of these remote healers?
Yes, there are. There are a lot of people doing this, and I think there are a lot of different names for it. Energetic healing, remote healing, distance healing. You can Google any of these things and find people that can help with these things. And again, you can really find almost anything from all extremes. But from my experience, people who really have a good understanding of biology and have a good understanding of psychology and have a system are the ones that are the most successful. So whether you're using some device that's actually putting out a healing frequency, if you understand how that works, and I think word of mouth really is the best way to, get these people who are best at doing this. But like I say, there are different techniques that people have developed, and it really depends where you're at and what you're trying to do. But I certainly think this is worth exploring in these times, because it is a way of connecting on some level. And we really don't know what that level is. Is it just the level of pure human connection, so you're getting that kind of placebo effect, or is it something much more interesting and in depth when you are actually getting some direct information transfer?
Yeah. I know where I would go for my trusted source. Would be Sarah Turner, our resident scientist, who would give us great references and great places to go. We will put some links up.
Yes, we can put lots of links on, because there are a lot of people doing very interesting work in this field and using all kinds of different devices or just using the power of their own intention. But we can definitely have a whole list of resources for depending on what people are looking for.
Let's talk about some of the crazy things that are happening in remote healing, some of the things that are just way out there, things we haven't touched on. I'd love to hear some of those.
Well, let's talk about water, because I think that's one of your specialist subjects too. Let's talk about water.
Yeah.
Let's talk about water, because from my point of view, this is a way to try and get your head around what might be going on with some of these different ways of energy and information transfer. And it's something that I also spent a long time looking at too. Can something as simple as water be a repository for this kind of information that can then be exchanged non-locally, if you like? Can you imprint information onto water? And it kind of talks to homeopathy. It talks to Dr. Emoto, who did kind of like those healing imprints onto water. If that is a kind of valid method, it would explain how possibly some of these things working, because of course our human bodies are water, we ingest these remedies. It's something that I've looked at, and there's actually a lot of fairly hardcore scientists involved in some of this study. I actually myself interviewed Dr. Luc Montagnier, who's a Nobel-winning scientist. He actually was credited for looking at how the AIDS related to HIV. Uh-huh. And he did some interesting experiments where he used DNA, for example, and he was able to transfer the signature of DNA totally non-locally into a water solution, and afterwards show that he had copied the particular information in a strand of DNA. Now, he did that using a way to record the signature. So what he's suggesting is that there is actually an electromagnetic signature that is one of the ways that you can pass on this information non-locally, which to me, that's very interesting to me, because that talks to charge, and that talks to things as a scientist that is tangible and I can get hold of.
Right. And I mean, and let's go back to the very, very basics. There are physical imprints of water, frozen water, and you can physically see an imprint of information on frozen water, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about literally transferring information within water, and water in itself having memory almost.
water having memory, but it's still a physical thing, because really when the way that Luc Montagnier describes it is that you have different charges on different aspects of these molecules, and water can have many forms, as we know from the work of Jerry Pollack, who's another scientist who's done a lot of work on water, and we've spoken about in previous podcasts. But so he's talking about an actual physical change of charge, either on metabolites that are contained in the water or on the water itself. So it is something tangible that potentially you can measure with the right equipment. So it's not something that's totally esoteric, which is why it's something that I gravitate to, because you can actually understand a physical mechanism behind it. Although it does seem the whole concept of memory in water, it does start to get a little bit more esoteric when you start to think about imprinting moods and things on water, because then you have to go with the concept that somehow or other that your changing mood changes the structure of space, which then has an impact on the water. So yes, it could be a physical thing that we just don't know. It could be something more esoteric.
Yeah.
I like to go with it is actually something more physical. We just
we were talking about the fact that the entire movie of Frozen 2 is based on the fact that water has memory, and we've written a lot about cryotherapy and the ability of what frozen water brings, but just that concept of that is really interesting. And quite honestly, water is probably one of the most fascinating substances, liquids on this planet.
Yeah, I agree.
We have no idea.
Agree. Yeah,
it's why we're searching. It's why we're searching Mars and all these other planets for any type of water, because we are one of the only ones I think we know that have this kind of water. I am curious, on the remote healing side, you just heard my dog Sunny bark, and I'm curious about dogs, because I feel like dogs have this innate ability. I have cats, and cats do not have this, but they have this intuition.
They
cats
have it, but they just don't care.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, exactly. They sort of know when they're going to be landing on the ground when they're falling from 20 feet up in the ground, and they can get their feet around. And I don't know how they do that, but with dogs, let's talk about dogs a little bit. I know there are a few studies around that as well.
Yeah, there's a really interesting book actually by a chap called Rupert Sheldrake, who's done a lot of research into these phenomena, if you want to call it that, of kind of remote communications. And he wrote this fabulous book called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. And that was based on a series of experiments that he did to see whether or not, he literally had a lot of people who had pets, dogs, that they felt really had this sixth sense that they knew when they were going to come home. And he actually did the experiment. So he sent these owners off, and he would then elect to choose a time that he would give them a message that they have to go home. And the theory was that the animal would get, it's almost like a glitch in the matrix. It's like a distortion in some kind of energy field that the animals are picking up on. That's kind of Rupert Sheldrake, he coined it the morphogenic field, this field of energy that potentially we can tap into. It's one of the ways that remote healing could possibly work. And yes, he did seem to get a statistically significant result that these animals did seem to go to the door when the owners were given that instruction to go home. And that was just one of his experiments. But yeah, perhaps other animals are more in tune with this field. Perhaps we as humans were in tune with it, but we don't need to have it so much, so we've lost it. Maybe, like, I have a science background, so maybe, that has kind of desensitized me to some of these things, because, I am very skeptical, and yet I know people who are very sensitive and claim they can pick up all kinds of information fields.
It's also the fact that we as humans are self-aware and these animals are not. So they have all that open brain space to spend on not worrying about themselves as much as we do as humans. They're worrying about everyone else. They're probably the most empathetic beings on the planet. Probably dogs are the most empathetic, I imagine.
Well, also dogs, again, we're pack animals, but dogs have evolved with us, and we have deliberately selected those animals that are most attentive to our human needs.
Sure.
So it stands to reason that, we would select for those dogs that kind of have that intuitive ability. So probably, years and years and years of selecting and domestication has bred animals that are actually much more in tune with humans,
Yeah, I think every dog owner that's listening will appreciate this. The dogs that are listening to this will not appreciate it. They don't want us to know their secret. So let's move on. I think we're coming to a close on this amazing topic. I know, I've gone through remote Reiki sessions. I've gone through remote meditation sessions. I've gone through remote yoga. I've gone through a lot of this, especially now in trying to stay connected and doing that. Are there specific ailments, illnesses that make sense for remote healing, like things that are kind of right down the fairway and straight, things you should focus on and use remote healing for?
No, I think most remote healers would kind of say it's really how open you are, and it's not necessarily the condition you have, because you're kind of tuning into this information field, and potentially, if a lot of illness is due to a distortion in some kind of energetic information field, it should be possible then to correct a lot of these imbalances. From my personal experience, it does seem to me there are certain conditions where people seem to get a better result. And those conditions seems to be ones that have a more functional basis, or more what they used to call psychosomatic. They don't use that term so much. Yeah. But that kind of condition, things like fibromyalgia, things like chronic pain. Yeah. Some certain depression and anxieties, but I think most remote healers would take a lot of different things on, and some people specialize in different things.
Yeah. What would be the three things, as we wrap up remote healing, what would be the three things as a takeaway for our listeners that you would get them to want them to remember from today?
I think certainly from my own direct experience and from researching some of these techniques, it is to be open-minded. And, there are some things that we're just not there with science yet. So to be open-minded and give some of these things a try. But be open-minded enough that you can kind of give it some space, but, not so gullible that you're just going to accept anything that comes along. But you do have to be very selective. But my advice is, we are in this position now where we are having to look at different alternatives to healing. So seek out these people and give it a try and really get your own experience of it, because you may be surprised. I know I was when I saw some of these things for myself. So I think really that's the take home. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why we're doing this. It's why, when we talked for the first time, it's why it's so important we bring someone like you to the world, because it is a trusted source. I mean, there are some bad actors out there. There are people that will take advantage of you with this kind of a topic. There are people that want that, and I'm glad we're doing this. What an amazing topic. My mind is blown. I'm present, and I love it, and I'm so glad we had a chance to talk about it today.
Yeah, me too. It's a very interesting subject. And like I say, I'm a little bit wary about it, because certainly for the first part of my career, I totally ruled all this out. But I've seen enough now. Yeah, I've seen enough now, and I've lived in California for a while. I've had the experiences. So this is definitely something that we need to consider. And again, always more research is needed. But I think, there's so much there to look into.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to talk about next?
We're going to talk about body work, I hope.
Yeah. The body-mind connection, somatic body work. So I'm looking forward to that, because we're going to get back to, to reality here.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's get back
Thank you again.
On trusted ground. Okay, Russ.
Exactly. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. The Rebel Scientist Podcast is a Breaking the Gray production, created by Russ Eisenman and Paul Wood, hosted by Sarah Turner, music and sound editing by Logan Shea. For more information and other fantastic podcasts, visit breakingthegray.com. That's gray with an E, breakingthegray.com. Breaking the Gray.